only back in 2019, we had a big discussion among NATO allies whether 5G and also whether the Chinese company Huawei, whether that was only a kind of a commercial economic issue, or whether who actually controls 5G networks is, yes, it is an economic and a commercial issue, but it is an economic and commercial issue with huge security consequences. So therefore we also need to take into account security considerations when we decide on 5G. So the awareness about these issues have increased enormously in NATO. We need to do more. We need to develop guidelines. We have some resilience guidelines. We need to improve them. We need to coordinate. We need to share information to ensure that we don't see once again what we have now seen with Russian gas. Then Salma, also the Netherlands. Yes, also the missile incident in Poland reminds us of the fact that wars are dangerous. 2 people were killed in Poland, and in wars accidents happen, and therefore it is extremely important that we are vigilant, that we monitor very closely, but also that we react in a calm and measured way, but also firm way, as we did after the incident in Poland. The incident is ongoing, so there are no absolute final conclusion. But we have no indication that this was a deliberate attack. We don't have any indication that that this was a Russian missile. And so far, we have the most likely reason is that it was a Ukrainian air defense missile that fell down in Poland. But let me then add the important thing. And that is that Russia bears the responsibility. Because what we do know with certainty is that this wouldn't have happened hadn't Russia invaded Ukraine and hadn't Russia the same day launched roughly 100 missiles against Ukraine. And of course, Ukraine has the right to defend themselves. So the responsibility for this is Russia's. And no, we welcome and we welcome the fact that Poland and Ukraine are now working together on the investigation. That's fine. It's important, and we need to find out exactly what happened. But it doesn't change the political reality. That it just highlights the importance of Russia ending this war as soon as possible and stop attacking Ukraine with missiles and drones.
Thank you. Our next 3 questioners are Jiří Horák of the Czech Republic, Theo Franken from Belgium, and David Johan Badaful from Germany. Jiří.
Thank you. Dear Mr. Secretary General, I'm interested in your view of the future of allied defense spending. Since it will be discussed at the Vilnius summit next year, I would like to know your prognosis. Are there plans to increase the pledge from 2% of GDP, or rather to make rules as to how the money is spent? Thank you.
Thank you. Theo.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about Sweden and Finland joining our alliance. I think it's very important to show unity. That means that we cannot delay their membership. So my question is, are there extra external diplomatic efforts that are taken to convince Hungary and Turkey to accept and to vote the membership in their parliaments? I understood from my Fidesz colleague yesterday that Hungary will vote the 7th of December, so that's good news. But Turkey, they have elections also. So I hope it will not take 1 year to have that vote. We need to show unity on all and show all efforts to get them in, because we need Finland and Sweden. It's in their interest, but it's also in our interest of our alliance to get them as soon as possible in our alliance. They're most welcome. From our point of view, we had voted this in Belgian Parliament within weeks. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Theo. David.
Thank you, Chair. Can I use the opportunity to thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for your ordinary service in our alliance, and that you stayed in this post, though there were alternatives for you personally. Really, you're I think you are the anchorman of our alliance. My question is that the Russian attack on Ukraine also learned us a new lesson, that the status of being partner of NATO does not deter a potential aggressor. What does that now mean for our NATO relationship to other partner states like Georgia? Thank you.
Thank you. And again, all of you concise, thank you. Mr. Secretary General.
First to the Czech Republic and Jiri about the defense spending. Yes, I believe that defense spending will be an important, very important issue at the Vilnius summit. I cannot tell you exactly what allies will agree when it comes to formulating the pledge for defense spending for the next decade. Also, because we finalized now the pledge we made in 2014 for 2014 to 2024. But I expect that it will be as an even stronger commitment to increasing defense spending, and I expect that in one way or another, even though perhaps the 2% will be kept, it will be kept more as a kind of floor than a ceiling for defense spending. But these are negotiations that will go on, but I'm absolutely confident that the ambitions will be increased in one way or another, because everyone now sees the need for investing more, and we also welcome that allies that have been below 2% now are setting new and more ambitious targets, and more allies are investing more, just because the world is more dangerous. Then you asked me about how to spend. Yes, well, we have the NATO defense planning process, which ends up with very specific capability targets for each and every ally. So there is a link between the ambition of spending more and the targets we agree for different capabilities that allies need to provide, with more heavy equipment, with more air defense systems, with higher readiness, and many other specific defense capabilities that allies should provide according to the agreed NATO capability targets. Then Belgium and Theo. Well, there are. Also, the Swedish Prime Minister went to Ankara. I have been in Istanbul, met with the President Erdogan, and of course we have a good conversation within the alliance on the ratification process. Then let me just remind you of the following: that so far the accession process for Finland and Sweden has been the quickest ever in NATO's modern history. I mean, we have to understand that it has hardly happened quicker any time before. Because Finland and Sweden applied in May, and then just a few weeks later in June, all 30 allies agreed to invite them to become members, and a couple of days later, all 30 allies signed the accession protocol. And already 28 out of 30 allies have now ratified. This is very fast, extremely quick, has not happened before in NATO's modern history. So yes, of course, I would very much like the two remaining allies to ratify, and I have expressed that many times. But we have to understand that this is so far very a quick process. Let me also add that Finland and Sweden are in a very different place now than they were before they applied. Because since they applied in May, several NATO allies, including the United Kingdom, United States, and many other European allies, have issued security assurances to Finland and Sweden. NATO has increased its presence, and 28 allies have already ratified, and all allies have signed the accession protocol. So it's absolutely inconceivable that if Finland or Sweden are subject to any kind of coercion or aggression by Russia against their countries, that NATO will not act. So it's not as if nothing has happened. They are extremely close to us. They have received security assurances, and Finland and Sweden participate in NATO's military and civilian activities in many different ways. So yes, I want the finalization of the accession protocol, but we have already achieved a lot just by what allies have done since they applied. Then Germany, David. you point at a very important point, and that is, of course, that we have a responsibility as allies, of course, to protect each other as NATO allies, but we also have a responsibility to ensure that our close partners, especially those who are most vulnerable for Russian coercion and aggression, like Georgia, that already have experienced Russian military aggression back in 2008, that we support them. And I strongly believe that as long as we don't achieve or we are not able to get full membership for these countries, then we should at least provide them with significant support. If there's any lesson from Ukraine, is that we should have supported Ukraine even more, even earlier. I would like to praise those allies that actually helped and supported Ukraine since 2014. NATO provided some support, some capacity building, some training, but we could have done more before the invasion. And that's exactly the same with Georgia and other countries that are our close partners. But I remember, for instance, I went to Yavoriv, which is a training site in West Ukraine, not so far from Lviv. And there I saw, back in 2015, the United States, Canada, but also United Kingdom, providing extensive training to Ukrainian forces. And of course, this training has been extremely important now after invasion. So if anything, we need more support for Georgia, more support for Moldova, more support for other partners at risk now. That's the lesson learned from Ukraine, and you have to help me, because then we need money from your parliaments.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Our next three questioners are Trond Helleland from Norway, Matej Tonen from Slovenia, and Najal Fridbetsson from Iceland. Trond.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear Jens, I asked you this question in Brussels 3 days before Russia's brutal aggression against Ukraine. Now the circumstances have changed. Norway shares a land border and a long maritime border with Russia, and we have long been NATO's eyes and ears in High North. Now we wholeheartedly welcome our Nordic brothers, Sweden and Finland, into NATO. The accession of Sweden and Finland will be good for the alliance as a whole and for all the Nordics. Now we get a longer border with Russia because of Finland's long border. But Norway will still be the only country in the region with a maritime border to Russia in the Barents Sea. At the same time, NATO membership for Sweden and Finland might also change how we currently think about supply routes across the Atlantic, defense planning in the Nordic region, and the relationship between the High North and the Baltic Sea. How, in your view, will Sweden and Finland's NATO membership affect NATO's and Norway's role in the High North? Thank you.
Thank you, Trond. Matej.
Honorable Secretary General, dear Jens, thank you for your extraordinary leadership in this demanding time. It was a privilege to cooperate with you in the last 3 years. Finland and Sweden are security contributors. It is in our interest that both countries become a full NATO members. Months ago, it seemed that Sweden and Finland won't become NATO members because of blockade. At that time, you stepped in and facilitated the dialogue. Can we expect from the Secretary General to step in the process again and accelerate it if needed?
Thank you. Najal.
Yes, thank you, President Connolly and Mr. Secretary General. We are all aware that the Arctic is becoming increasingly important in its strategic security and economic dimensions. As Russia's invasion of Ukraine ends a post-Cold War era of low tension and cooperation, such events highlight how hard it is for states to monitor their own waters, particularly in the High North. With Finland and Sweden joining, 7 out of 8 Arctic Council states will be NATO allies, which I believe will directly affect Russia's calculus and possible responses in the region. While our common goal is stability and cooperation in the Arctic, we must consider the possibility of Russia deciding to employ a more confrontational force posture in the region, as well as in the Baltic. Can you elaborate on that possibility and NATO's role in that region? And finally, it goes without saying that Iceland strongly supports Finland and Sweden's imminent application for membership in NATO. Thank you, General Secretary, for an outstanding job.
Thank you, Najo. Mr. Secretary General.
Thank you so much. I think actually I will answer the question from Iceland and Norway, from Njål and from Trond together, because partly because Iceland and Sweden used to be, Iceland and Norway used to be the same country for many hundred years ago, before the Danes came and created some problems there. But more importantly, because you asked about the same issue, about Finland and Sweden and the High North. And fundamentally, Finnish and Swedish membership will strengthen NATO in the High North. There's no doubt. Because Finland and Sweden are extremely capable countries. We know that because they have been very close partners with NATO for many, many years. They have advanced systems. Finland has a large army. They have advanced defense industries. They have high-end capabilities. And they have well-organized defense forces and strong democratic institutions. Therefore, they have been our closest partners for many, many years. We have worked together with them, we have trained together with them, so we know them well. And therefore, it's no doubt that they will strengthen NATO throughout the alliance, but of course, in particular in the north, because of the geographic location in the north. This will also help us to both increase our presence in the Barents Sea, in the High North. You are right, Trond, that Finland and Sweden, they don't have any coastline to the Barents Sea or the North Atlantic, but they have significant air capabilities that can help us to patrol and monitor also up in the High North. And of course also have naval capabilities that can be deployed up there. And of course, especially Finland, with the long border, also has a knowledge about Russia, which is unique. When Finland joins the alliance, NATO's border with Russia will more than double. So the Finnish border with Russia is longer than the total existing NATO-Russia border. So all of this will, of course, enhance our ability, both to deal with the challenges in the High North, but also in the Baltic. Because again, if you just look at the map, we have always been concerned about our ability to reinforce the Baltic, and we have the Suwalki gap. With Finland and Sweden in the alliance, it will change very much the geography when it comes to NATO's presence in the Baltic. There's no doubt that their membership will be good for NATO allies in many different ways, and therefore I welcome them. And Mateusz from Slovenia, it's good to see you again. We met often in the ministerial meetings, but now you asked me about whether I will step in. I have never stepped out, in a way that I have been working hard for enlargement of NATO since I arrived. First with first with Montenegro, then with North Macedonia, and then with Finland and Sweden. I like my family, or our family, to be bigger, and when there are candidates, we work on that. And I'm glad that first we had 2 members from the Western Balkans, and now we will have 2 new members from the north. All of this is strengthening NATO across the board. So that's in my answer, whether we will step in. But let me add one more thing, and that is that and I engage, of course, with Finland, I engage with Sweden, I engage with Turkey. But let me remind you of the trilateral agreement that was signed here in Madrid in June. That was a trilateral agreement between Turkey, Finland, and Sweden. NATO didn't sign. We were in the room. Osman, again, you were there, yeah. But I didn't sign. I only welcomed the signing of the others. So meaning it's a trilateral agreement between those 3 countries. So at the end of the day, it's those 3 countries that have to ensure the full implementation. But I welcome that Finland and Sweden has delivered, and then I just think that the time has come for finalizing the ratification. Then that's all three, because I lumped Finland and two of them together, Iceland and Norway.
And that was important to learn about that Iceland-Norway thing. The Secretary General faces many challenges in this tumultuous world, but he's already handled 15 questions from this body. So thank you for your patience. We got three more. Ante Bakic from Croatia, Arta Bilali-Zendeli from North Macedonia, and Mati Redma from Estonia. Ante.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Secretary General, Dobar dan, and greetings from the Croatian delegation. You know, last month we held the first parliamentary summit of the International Crimea Platform in Zagreb, and which brought together 48 speakers of parliaments and presidents of interparliamentary organizations, like our president from NATO PA, Mr. Connolly, was there. In Zagreb, we proudly demonstrated support to Ukraine, and I would like to hear your comments and thoughts about how to politically approach another issue that in a way bothers NATO and the EU in the Southeast Europe. It is an issue of somehow stalled NATO's political outreach in the Western Balkan countries. I mean the political interaction and practical cooperation with regard, you mentioned the country Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also in Kosovo. The interaction do exist, but the feeling is that everything that has been done in the past has been overshadowed by the malign foreign influence that keeps these countries blocked in a kind of endless limbo and miles away from the further alignment with our common values and political posture. In terms of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo, what else beyond being simply vigilant can NATO do in order to counter foreign political goal of undermining those countries and preventing them to become more stable and secure on the path of the EU and NATO? Thank you.
Thank you, Ante. Arta.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Secretary General, before the war, we all thought that Russia has very tight links with China. And now, somehow, China is out of the picture. We saw recently some strong cooperation between Russia and Iran, but again, I will repeat, China is out. My question is, where do you see the role of China in the picture? And how do you assess its not active role or position after the war or after the Russian invasion in Ukraine? Thank you.
Thank you. And Mati.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear Secretary General, my question addressing, again, air defense issue. Today's genocidal war by Russia in Ukraine is a clear testimony that Russia violates all international rules and agreed principles, and inhuman and unacceptable attacks on the population and civil infrastructure without any military meaning is today's new reality. I call all NATO members to make greater and faster efforts than today to support the military capability of Ukraine. The future of not only Ukraine depends on it, but the future of all of us. In connection with the new reality presented above, the need to secure also the missile and air defense capability of NATO, especially the territories of its eastern flank, is getting a new and broader meaning today. Also the need for more forced action plan. Could you share your views on this matter? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary General.
Thank you so much. First to Ante and Croatia on the Kosovo and Bosnia. As you know, the Western Balkans matters for NATO. We have a long history there. We helped to end the two brutal wars, first in Bosnia and later on in Kosovo, Serbia. And we also helped to stabilize North Macedonia almost 20 years ago. And we still have a presence. We have our headquarters in Sarajevo, we have the office in Belgrade, and of course we have the KFOR forces in Kosovo, and we also have now several members in the region, full-fledged NATO allies. I mentioned North Macedonia and Montenegro as two of our newest members. all of this makes the Western Balkans an important region for NATO. In Kosovo, while we continue our presence, we support by our military presence the EU-led efforts for a diplomatic solution. We support the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, and I think it demonstrates actually how well NATO and the European Union can work together, complementing each other, with the NATO forces supporting the EU diplomatic efforts in Kosovo. We also work closely with the EU in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and at the Madrid summit we decided to step up political and practical support for our partners in the Western Balkans, including Bosnia and Herzegovina, and to help them to resist malign influence from Russia. We are also stepping up our support to Bosnia and Herzegovina in different ways in order to help them, including by more and enhanced defense capacity building, a new package of defense capacity building efforts for Bosnia and Herzegovina, to help them to implement its plans for modernization of its defense and security institutions. We are working closely to help them. It's not easy, but we will continue to do what we can to help to address the instability and the challenges, and including the malign influence of especially Russia in the region. Then Arta, North Macedonia, the role of China related to the Ukraine conflict, if I understood the question right. Well, first of all, we have called on China, and that was also my message when I met with the Chinese foreign minister in New York during the UN General Assembly, that China should clearly condemn the illegal Russian invasion of Ukraine. They have not voted in favor of the different UN resolutions doing so, but we call on them to do that. And also, of course, we regret that just days before the invasion, Russia and China signed a joint declaration, or President Putin and President Xi signed this joint declaration where they stated that the partnership with Russia and China, between Russia and China, is without limits. Having said that, of course, we also welcome that China, at least so far, has not provided any military support to Ukraine. This is important. No one should support Ukraine. Russia in their efforts to occupy Ukraine. No one should provide support to Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, and that has also been a clear message from NATO allies to China. Then Matti from Estonia on air defences. Well, air defences is extremely important. But I think sometimes we need to realize that air defences is partly land-based systems, like the Patriot batteries or the SAM-T batteries and these land-based systems, or the NASAMS, which I've seen very effective in Ukraine. But air defense systems are also very often based on ships, and they are extremely capable and very mobile, and also, of course, planes. Our jet fighters are also an important part of our air defense systems, partly with their sensors, but also partly because of their capability to intercept incoming missiles or other types of air attacks. So the fact that we have significantly increased our presence both on land but also at sea and in the air in the Baltic region and in the east, and that we can very quickly reinforce if needed. I visited recently the USS George H.W. Bush, the aircraft carrier. It was based in the Adriatic Sea, but those capabilities on that aircraft carrier, supported by ships from Italy, from Turkey, from many other NATO allies, they represented huge capability also when it comes to air defense. So yes, we need to do more on air defense, but we should not underestimate the capabilities we already have in place, and also our ability to reinforce with air and naval assets quickly if needed.
Thank you. You doing all right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So our next three are Zsolt Nemeth from Hungary, Anna Maria Katara from Romania, and Raymond Bergmanis from Latvia. Zsolt.
Thank you very much, President. I am right to you, Secretary General. Right to you. I would like to greet you in the name of the Hungarian delegation and express our gratitude for your work and for your presence here. I think you have been instrumental in maintaining the unity of the alliance in the past period, and I would like to congratulate you on that. My original question would have related the Western Balkans, but probably you have covered it more or less in the previous round. So I would like to ask you a question which relates the European political community. On the 6th of October, President Macron has initiated this new format. And in the Council of Europe and in parliamentary level, we are fighting with this challenge. What is the role of this organization relating to the Council of Europe, relating to NATO? And I think it is just in the formation. And may I ask you if you have any position, personal position, because probably not yet official one. How do you see the relationship between NATO and this new European format, which targets at security aims as well? It seems that the security dimension of this European political community is quite decisive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zsolt. Anna Maria.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, Secretary General. The summit in Madrid marked a very important moment for the alliance in general, but also for the eastern flank. And with the new battle groups that will be in place for different European countries on the eastern flank, including Romania, the deterrence and defense of the eastern flank will be more balanced, and we are very excited about having them fully operational. But you mentioned earlier the lessons learned from Ukraine, and my question would be, in terms of a more multi-domain perspective, what will the Vilnius summit discuss on the deterrence and defense of the eastern flank, including cyber, including space, and why not including maritime security and the free flow of trade? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Raymond.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary General, I'm not going to repeat what Russia did and continue to do in Ukraine, but my question is about security of Russia's neighbors, namely the Baltic states. Taking into consideration that one of the major subjects for our NATO PA, Defense and Security Committee, for next year will be evolving Baltic Sea security. Could you elaborate on that? How the NATO started to work on the new plans for security of the Baltic states, and after full accessions of Sweden and Finland about plans for security of the whole Baltic Sea region. We hope and we would like to believe that both our colleagues, Sweden and Finland, will be able to participate in the next NATO summit as full-fledged members. By the way, next summit will be held again in the Baltics, this time in Vilnius.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary General.
Thank you so much. First, the question from Zsolt, Hungary, on the European political community. Well, also, NATO allies and also non-allies that were present there, of course, they meet in different formats and in different organizations and institutions. And I think, in general, it's good that allies and close partners in Europe meet in different ways, as long as we all are aware of that the bedrock for our security remains NATO, because the bedrock for our security is transatlantic, and there is no way that can be replaced. As I said many times before, I welcome European efforts on defence. And I welcome EU efforts on defence, on providing more capabilities, PESCO to address the fragmentation of the European defence industry, or the European Defence Fund, and many other efforts. That's very important and something I welcome. And of course, any meaningful strengthening of European defences requires more defence spending, and NATO has been calling for increased defence spending across Europe for years, and now that's happening, and that's a good thing. But this can only complement, not replace NATO. Because 2 world wars and the Cold War taught us that our security is totally dependent on the North Atlantic link, on the North Atlantic bond. Europe, North America, and Canada together. And I'm therefore glad also that the message is that this is not any alternative to NATO. The aim is to complement and to strengthen what we do together. And I think also we have seen that in Ukraine. Of course, the reality is that there's a support from the United States and North America to North American countries has been critical for the gains that Ukrainians have made, and also the fact that especially Canada and the United States, they have been there since 2014. They have trained tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers. And then, of course, you have also allies that have supported Ukraine, especially since the invasion, but we need to do this as North America and Europe together. Then Anna-Maria, Romania. Well, the multi-domain approach, of course, will be a part of what we address in Vilnius, as it has been actually for a long time. We have to remember that we are very much aware of that any military conflict in the future involving NATO allies, especially in a large-scale conflict, will be multi-domain. It will not only be land or sea or air. It will be land, sea, air, and cyber, and space. And space and cyber is integrated in everything we do. Our land operations, our operations at sea and in the air are totally dependent on cyber, of course. And cyber and our communications and targeting and a lot of things that we do on land or on Earth is dependent on space capabilities, satellites, GPS, navigation. So there is no way to not be multi-domain. We have to be multi-domain in everything we do, and that's also reflected in our new plans and the decisions we have made, both on cyber and space, establish them as a new military domains alongside air, sea, and land. Then Ramon, great to see you again. Latvia, always, of course, focused on the Baltic region. Of course, when Finland and Sweden joins, we will also then adjust our defence plans and our defence planning processes to take that into account. And without going into details, partly because some of these plans are quite secret, it's everyone that looks at the map understands that it has a huge impact on our ability to protect and defend the Baltic region, and that increases our deterrence. And by doing so, we are further reducing the risk on any attack on any NATO ally, because the purpose of NATO is not to actually the main purpose of NATO is to preserve peace, is to prevent an attack. And the stronger our deterrence and defence is, the more likely it is, or the less likely it is that there will be any attack. And therefore, I welcome also Finland and Sweden as members, because it will strengthen further our deterrence and defence across the lines.
Thank you. Our next three questioners are Risto Gatchev of Bulgaria, Mikhail Sherba of Poland, and Lord Hamilton from the UK. Is that a cheering section for you, Lord Hamilton? Okay, Risto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary General, first of all, I would like to say that the newly elected Parliament in Sofia, one of the first decisions that we made was to make a decision to send direct military support to Ukraine. And I think this is important for our country to do. I have two quick questions following the time. You mentioned a couple of times the air defense. You mentioned the air defense in the Baltics, but what about the southeastern flank? Should it be reinforced after the incident in Poland last week? And the second question is, what is the possibility of joining the efforts between NATO and the EU on resilience capacity building between the two organizations? As you mentioned, most of the EU citizens will live in NATO countries after the accession of Finland and Sweden. Thank you.
Thank you. Mikhail.
Mr. Secretary General, I'm here. Thank you for your strong leadership in these difficult times. We should be prepared for more hostile actions against Ukraine, but also against NATO states. Russia's aim are to weaken us, diminish our determination to support Ukraine, and we can't fall into Ukraine fatigue mode. Even today, this morning, our Assembly has shown responsible unity and soon will give a strong message of solidarity with Ukraine in our resolution. Russia's action against Ukraine are escalatory, and last week the massive attack on Ukraine's infrastructure was the largest since the beginning of the war. Recent incident in Polish territory is also a result of this escalation. Ukraine needs more Western advanced precision weapon, and we ask NATO governments for it. Two questions to you, Mr. Secretary General. In reference to escalation, how NATO can strengthen its military presence in the eastern flank. A lot has been done, but what should be the next steps? And the second question, do you agree we need to reflect better on threat from the territory of Belarus? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And Lord Hamilton.
Secretary General, you've emphasized to us how essential it is that the war is won in Ukraine and that the Russians are beaten. This would have happened already if we'd imposed a no-fly zone in Ukraine. People who are worried about a no-fly zone say that we would be inevitably in conflict with the Russians. That is because the air defense systems are the other side of the Russian border. We could create a cordon sanitaire, which meant that we were out of range of air defenses in Russia. And so what is the chance of, what's the military argument for imposing a no-fly zone? Surely it's quite possible to do this.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary General.
First, Risto from Bulgaria, air defenses in the Black Sea region. Well, as we have increased our presence also in the Black Sea region, and as I said several times, this includes also air defense capabilities, and with our air and naval capabilities, it's also easy to quickly reinforce. But let me just add one more thing, and it's not as if NATO has some kind of unlimited access to NATO air defense systems. Of course, what we are dependent on is that allies provide air defense systems and that we pull them together. So, if anything, it just highlights the importance of allies meeting at least the 2% target and also delivering on the NATO capability targets to be able to provide the necessary capabilities to increase our air defense of NATO territory and our ability to reinforce. So this is what we do, but we are totally, as always, totally dependent on allies to deliver on what they have promised. Then you asked about NATO EU. I think I've already said some few words about that, but let me just add that, again, especially with Finland and Sweden inside, 96% of the people living in the EU will live in a NATO country. That makes it just even more important that we avoid duplication. What the EU does is complementing NATO efforts, and of course, Also, I'm personally a strong supporter of the EU. I've tried to convince the Norwegian people to join EU twice and lost twice. But I am arguing in favor of EU. As I believe in the European Union as a concept, as an idea. But at the same time, you just need to realize that there are also many. First of all, we have North America, we have Canada and the United States, and they're not small nations. They actually contribute to our shared security. But second, we have also some Europeans who are outside the European Union. There is more Europe in NATO than there is Europe in EU. There are 450 million Europeans in the EU, and that's 600 million Europeans in NATO. So it's not. We need to ensure that we work together in NATO to address the security needs for all allies, inside or outside the EU. I welcome EU efforts, but it doesn't replace NATO, and it must not duplicate NATO. And I say that as a strong friend of the EU, and also I'm proud that as Secretary General of NATO, I have been able to work together with the presidents, the leadership of the European Union, and also the different EU members to lift NATO-EU cooperation to unprecedented levels. Mikhail from Poland, you mentioned Ukraine fatigue, and that's extremely important what you said. And that is, we must prevent that from happening. Because we cannot allow President Putin to win. And he should never believe that democracies are in a way not resilient, are not able to sustain an effort over time. And as I said, this is because it will be a catastrophe for Ukraine, but it will also be extremely dangerous for us. Because then the lesson learned will be that by using force, he gets exactly what he wants. So this is also about our security interests. But to prevent any fatigue, to enable us to continue to support, at the end of the day, there's only one thing that depends on, and that is the support from our public. So we need the support, and you are closer to them than anyone else, because you are elected representatives from your different constituencies. So I do what I can. I travel around and argue in favor of support to Ukraine. But you need, and I know that you do that, but we need your support in the different member states, allies, to ensure that people understand why we need to pay a price to ensure freedom and democracy, and that is in our interest. Sorry, you asked also about what we will do to further increase. So, first of all, we have doubled the number of battle groups from 4 to 8. We did that after we have done that over the last months. Second, what we agreed in Madrid is that we have to be able to scale these battle groups up to brigade size level. We will start to exercise and test that, and the way we do that is to have earmarked forces. For instance, Germany have now earmarked a brigade that can be deployed to Lithuania on very short notice. They will exercise and so on. So there will be a close link between those forces and the ability to scale up the brigade or the battle group to a brigade size on very short notice. Second, we are going to pre-position more supplies and more equipment. And again, you see in the war in Ukraine how important supplies, ammunition, equipment is. And thirdly, we will increase the readiness of forces. So where needed, we can deploy forces quickly. And then there are a wide range of other things we will do on air, naval capabilities, cyber, that also matters for the defense of the eastern part of the alliance. Then Lord Hamilton, also on the no-fly zone. I am aware that this has been an issue. It was raised at the beginning of the war. I think that for allies, it is important that we are not party to the conflict. And if we started to deploy forces into Ukraine, we would become party to the conflict. But allies are very determined to help Ukraine defend their own airspace. And that's exactly what they have done by providing all the air defense systems, the ammunition to the air defense systems. The UK have done that, extremely important. But also but also the fact that they are providing training. Again, UK is leading training efforts. I just visited the United Kingdom, and I met there with British trainers, but also with trainers from Denmark, from Lithuania, from Canada, from many other countries that are helping to train Ukrainian soldiers also with air defense capabilities in United Kingdom as a joint effort by many NATO allies, and United Kingdom has actually provided training to Ukraine since 2014, and this makes a huge difference. So we will help them to protect their airspace, and that's the way we will ensure that they are able to shoot down Russian missiles, drones, and strengthen their control over their own airspace.
I thank the Secretary General. I would only note that we had no-fly zones in Iraq, in the north and in the south, and we in fact did engage with and shoot down Iraqi aircraft. And so the risk of engagement when you have to enforce a no-fly zone is very real. And our goal is to constrain and end this war, obviously, not to expand it. Our last, if you're willing, our last three questioners are Manousis Volodakis from Greece, Hans Wellmark from Sweden, and Mikko Savola from Finland. Manousis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. General Secretary, you said that the accession process of Sweden and Finland has been the quickest yet. Nevertheless, it might be not quick enough because it is the only one that has been going on while war rages on in our backyard. Finland and Sweden, and moreover, there are not procedural issues with this. There are political issues, in particular Turkey's objections. Finland and Sweden had to declare something that's a self-evident truth to most of us, that they do not nurture terrorism. 5 months have passed and we still see no progress. To the citizens of member states, the question is raised, what is going on? Are there any concerns regarding the ability of Finland and Sweden to counter terrorism? Thank you.
Thank you. Hans.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you that the Secretary General reminded of the special relations between Iceland and Norway. Let me remind the Secretary General of the special relations between Sweden and Norway.
If the gentleman would suspend, we cannot hear the questioning because of discussion. If you're going to have discussions, I would respectfully ask you to take them out of the plenary session. The gentleman may resume.
Thank you. Well, let me remind the Secretary General of the special relations between Sweden and Norway. We share the kingdom for 100 years. And we are very fortunate to have very good neighbors, but we also try to be a good neighbor and a good ally, and that is also our intention, together with Finland inside NATO. We see ourselves and Finland as a security provider into NATO, and we also have this broad concept on security. It's on the hard defense, but also on the fight against terrorism, and therefore I hope that in the coming days we can also convince Turkey of this trilateral agreement, that we are delivering on it. And I really want to ensure that Sweden and Finland also taking with us and transmit all the good words, all the friendly cheering and the support for our countries into NATO, because I think that everything is linked to each other. So the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, the Baltic Sea and High North are linked together, and therefore we're going to be a provider of security. So in Swedish, tack, in Finnish, kiitos.
Thank you, Hans. Mikko.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's easy to continue what the brother from the Sweden just said. I want to thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for support in our goal of becoming a member of NATO. And I also want to thank you all wonderful colleagues here, partners and friends welcoming us to the Alliance. Almost all of you have ratified our membership in your parliaments already, and you did it very rapidly. As the Mr. Secretary General said, this has been the fastest process ever. Maybe one question to Mr. Secretary General. Finland and Sweden wants to be the security providers in NATO. In Finland we have a strong conscription army with over 900,000 reservists, and we are spending now that over 2% of the GDP to the defense cost. So you partly answered the question already, but how do you see the future role of Finland and Sweden in the NATO defense policy planning? Thank you all, wonderful colleagues, and Mr. Secretary General.
Thank you so much. Mr. Secretary General.
Thank you so much. First to Malusis from Greece on Swedish and Finnish membership. There is a process, there is a dialogue, and I'm confident that Finland and Sweden will become, they are already invited, we already signed the accession protocol, but I'm confident that we'll be able to finalize the accession process within reasonable time. I will not speculate exactly when, but the sooner the better. But as I've said already, Finland and Sweden are in a very different place now than before they applied. It matters that all allies have signed the accession protocol. It matters that they are now participating in NATO's military and civilian structures. It matters that several NATO allies have issued security assurances. And it matters that NATO has increased its presence in the region. So it is absolutely inconceivable that there will be any kind of aggression against Finland and Sweden without NATO acting. So it's not as nothing has happened, a lot has happened already. Then we also have to remember that no other ally has suffered more terrorist attacks than Turkey, and they have the right for self-defense. And they have some concerns, they've raised them, and now they are addressed by Finland and Sweden, and I welcome that very constructive process. Then Hans from Sweden. Yes, you are right, we are good neighbors, and for roughly 100 years we had the same king. The more surprising thing that the first common king we had was actually a French general, Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte, who actually ended up as a Swedish king. And the last time Sweden was at war was against Norway, and since then it has been very peaceful, and then you join NATO. So this is a
little more bitterness coming out.
No, it's not bitterness. The strange thing with the Nordic countries is that they have been fighting for centuries, and now they're best friends, and they can joke with it. That's a good thing. But you're right, and you're right that the Nordic countries are all very close neighbors. They work very closely together, and of course it will strengthen also the cooperation in the High North when all the countries are part of the same security alliance, part of NATO, and that's something that will benefit the whole alliance. Then Nico, Finland, you also spoke about the membership. Yes, also it will. By being together in NATO, we can work so even more closer together, and I think it's important also to convey the message to the rest of the alliance that this is not only good for the Nordics, but it's good for the whole alliance. It's obvious when it comes to the Baltics, the eastern part of the alliance, because we have then much better ways to reinforce that part of the alliance if needed. But it's also critical for the whole transatlantic link, because by increasing our strength in the High North, we also strengthening our capability to protect the vital links of communications, the sea lines across the North Atlantic. And that is exactly what is binding North America and Europe together, and which is the fundamental link within the NATO alliance. And I also know that Finland and Sweden, they are ready to participate in different NATO missions and operations. They have been in Afghanistan, they have been in Iraq, they have participated also in many of the missions we are conducting in the south. And Sweden just announced that they will contribute more also to the NATO counter-terrorism fund. So actually I'm absolutely certain that this will benefit not only the north, but the whole of the alliance. Then I think I've covered all questions, and it's all. And then let me just end by saying, for me, it is always a pleasure to meet you, and I really mean it, because you are so important for the strength of this alliance. Without parliaments in our back, without parliaments supporting us, the efforts of NATO allies, there is no way that NATO can continue as the most successful alliance in history. So I thank you for your support, for your commitment, and what you do every day to ensure that NATO remains the most successful alliance in history. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We promised to have you out of here at 12:50, and it's 12:47. So, thank you for always being there for us, and thank you for your critical leadership at a very difficult moment here in Europe. We know we're in steady hands, having Jens Stoltenberg as the Secretary General of our alliance. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. So let me just fill in, we have some business left. We're going to do the Carl Lammerts Prize, and I see Carl.